Great. Well, welcome back. We are about to get started with our first session of the day, defining a purpose through vision. And in this session, you'll have to hear a little bit more from me. My name is Tom Lillig. I'm the board president of No Barriers. But you'll also get to learn from these world famous barrier breaker, Eric Weinmeier, and also a key part of our caregiver program, Rachel Davis. And through the extraordinary stories of Eric and Rachel, we hope that you will be able to define your vision and move closer to achieving your pledge goal. And ultimately, come to believe that what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. So we're going to take some time to think about that No Barriers pledge. We all made that when we came to the summit, when we signed on for the summit. And there is a pledge table over here. If you feel compelled, come over and write out your pledge on that pledge table. And for our thousands of folks online in the virtual summit, feel free to go to the pledge chat area and enter your pledge there. What we want to do is take some time to think about that No Barriers pledge and how vision can ultimately help you fulfill that pledge. It can drive you forward to fulfill that pledge. And if you've not created that pledge yet, no worries. You'll get some information that you need in this session so that you can develop one and ultimately move closer to defining that vision for yourself. You know, when I think about the No Barriers community and what we're trying to do with creating a community that embraces a vision as a core part, I think it's so important that we lean into each other and we learn from each other. And what I'm going to ask you to do is learn today from what I can share, but also from what Eric and Rachel are going to bring us. So the first question is, what is vision? Well, at No Barriers, vision is the very first element of the No Barriers life. We have 7 elements across the board, and it all starts with vision. We believe that by following these elements of a No Barriers life, a person is going to be able to break through those barriers, those very real barriers that they're facing, and move to live a purpose-driven life. You know, we've had No Barriers for decades and decades, and in that time, we've served tens and thousands of participants. And in that time period, we've sort of tested things out, and you know, with Eric and his team's help, we've created basically what amounts to this world-class test kitchen of having people work through a variety of elements and moving closer to living that No Barriers life. And what we found throughout all of the work and throughout all of the learning is defining these core elements. And these core elements all start with the all-important vision, right? If you want to learn more about vision, I'd recommend you pick up the book What's Within You, or you can go to our website, nobarriersusa.org. But in the course of our time today and at this summit, we're going to introduce you to 4 elements, and the first one starts with vision. When you hear the word vision, you may think of it as this goal that you want to achieve, But the way that we think about vision is a little different. For us, vision is your purpose that inspires you to give your best back to the world. It states who you want to be and why that matters. It's about more than any one goal, any one achievement, any one summit that you climb. It's about this enduring statement that embodies what you value most. As we move through the rest of the session, I want you to think about vision as that enduring purpose that inspires you to give your very best back to the world. Before we meet our first speaker, what I wanted to do is allow each of you to connect with others who are sitting around you and take a moment to explore what your vision is, what you have inside of you that drives you forward. What is that fire that enlivens you, that excites you, that makes you wake up in the morning and say, yes, I can? So I want to give you 30 seconds to reach out to that person right next to you and share a little bit about what that fire is inside of you, because that is going to be the core of vision. So take 30 seconds and introduce yourselves and share a little bit about what that light inside of you is. It'll help you as we get through this next exercise. Hey, Lisa. Can't hear you. Well, I'm glad that you've been able to connect with your neighbor and started thinking about that fire inside of you. That's going to be the core of what your vision statement ultimately ends up being. But right now, I want to introduce you. Thank you. I want to introduce you to a very special guest. If you were here last night, you had the opportunity to hear a little bit about him and see him in the films. But I want to introduce you to my special friend, No Barriers co-founder and blind adventurer, Eric Weinmeyer. Eric. Here you go. Yeah.
Come on. Thank you.
Thank you. We got a podium right here for you.
Sweet.
So more than anyone else in the world, Eric is the person that I look to when I think about defining a vision for myself. He has helped me through all of his example and through his writing with that. And I just am so glad to have him here for this session
Tom.
today.
Sweet.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Tom. Good job so far. What an awesome. My mic, there we go. What an awesome morning it's been. Thank you to all the speakers and performers today. It's just been so enlightening and beautiful and inspiring. So thank you, everyone, so far. You guys enjoying yourselves? Yeah, good. Awesome. I'd like to hear you out there. I appreciate that. Those stairs are kind of wobbly. I feel like I'm in the Khumbu Icefall getting up onto the stage. So vision. I learned a lot about vision when I started kayaking. Because when you're kayaking, any kayakers out there? Don't raise your hands. Yeah, okay, good. So you're on the surface and you're experiencing all this chaos, all this craziness, waves hitting you left and right, rocks, holes that are churning that grab you and suck you down and want to flip you. And it's very easy to be lulled into the idea that everything you're experiencing is happening on the surface. And really, though, what's happening is all that energy on the surface is being created from the very depths of the river, the very bottom of the river, all these currents that are at the very bottom that are flowing up and reacting to the surface. And so you think that you're on the surface, everything you're experiencing in that reality is right in the sliver of this awareness that you're experiencing at that very moment. But how often do we get a chance to really dive down into the depths, down into these deeper places of our psyche, of our soul, and really try to understand the source? What's inside of us? What are the cause and effects of what we bring forth into the world? And so I think it's really important to dive in and really try to understand what our vision is. What is at the source? And as Tom mentioned, it's easy also to think of vision, like in business, which is perfectly fine, predicting the future. It's almost impossible to predict the future, but people try to do it. Where am I going to be in 30 years? What am I going to achieve? Am I going to make a lot of money? Am I going to climb mountains? Those are really goals. And we think of vision as something different. It's more of an internal vision. It's a vision of how we see ourselves living our lives and serving ourselves and serving others. What kind of value system do we create in our lives that support us and those goals? What kind of legacy do we leave behind us? What kind of contributions do we want to make to the world? And I think it's so easy to create these long lists of goals, New Year's resolutions, and but those goals can become unfulfilled, or they can even spin out of control and lead us in places that we never wanted to go to in the first place. When I think we need to continually reconnect with that unifying vision that takes those goals and binds them together and gives them purpose and power. And I think also that vision can lead us forward like a compass through the storms of our lives, and so that we can emerge on the other side stronger, brighter. I learned a lot about vision going blind, sadly. Sometimes it takes adversity to learn about these things. Going blind a week before my freshman year in high school, it was like a storm that had descended upon me with such force and viciousness, I thought I'd be crushed by it. Being led into school, being led into the cafeteria. And I was really sad about going blind. That was sad. But it didn't even compare to my fear of missing out. All my friends on these other tables having fun, having food fights, telling jokes. And so for me, the real fear was that I would be shoved to the sidelines, that I'd be thrown into this dark place, I'd be left there, I'd be forgotten. I'd never be able to live that adventurous life. I'd never be in the food fights. I'd never be a part of great things. I'd never connect in a deep way with other human beings. I'd never be a part of great things and great teams. All those fears of what I was going to miss out on. Those were way more powerful, way scarier than anything blindness could do to me. And I could see just out of one eye, just a little bit out of my right eye, and I could watch TV still, maybe for a few more months as I lost the last traces of vision. And I was watching this show one night, and you might remember, it was in the 80s. Anyone remember the show That's Incredible? Yeah. Yeah, it was an amazing show, and or I should say it was an incredible show. And they were focusing on this guy named Terry Fox. Terry was a Canadian. He lost a leg to cancer, and he was still in the hospital when he decided that he was going to run across Canada. Now, that is not a normal decision most people would have done in that situation. Most people, you shrink up and you protect a little bit you have left. But nobody taught that to Terry. He understood, maybe intuitively, counterintuitively, that between the things that happen to you and the ways that you are supposed to react, there is a space. And in that space, there is a choice. And he chose to run across Canada, a marathon a day, uh, thousands of miles across Canada. And he was in the hospital when he was watching other kids much younger than him die of cancer. And instead of allowing that darkness to crush him, he kind of gathered it up and he created it, he transformed it into something bigger, a darkness into a vision. And he used that vision as energy to propel himself forward every step along that trail. The miles took a terrible toll on his body. You know, I remember looking at his stump covered with blisters, the look on his face, an absolute contradiction, full of exhaustion at the same time, full of exaltation. And I thought to myself, there's something inside of us. I could only at the time describe it as a light. I mean, you could describe it as anything, the human spirit, a soul, whatever you want to call it. What is that deep down? I thought of it as a light that Terry seemed to use, that seemed to transcend his fragile human shell. And he seemed to be able to take those shortfalls, those failures, those struggles, and use them as a fuel source. The greater the challenge, the brighter that light just kept burning. And I hoped it existed in me. You know, because I had been doing what the world taught, which is to look out into the world and try to predict who would I be. But all I could see was a brick wall in front of me. I was in this prison that I couldn't break out of. But I realized that instead of looking out into the world and blaming and reacting and responding and attacking, what I needed to do was to turn inward into that light of Terry and commit to it, and commit to the values that spring from that light, and grow it and nurture it and kindle it and allow it to blaze into the world, to light my way forward, you know, through that storm that you can't see. I can never see, but some of us want to be able to see, right? Yeah, so it becomes like a headlamp in a storm that guides us through, that tells us where we're going and tells us why it's so important we get there so that we can emerge on the other side, not just damaged as little as possible, but stronger and brighter. And so it was that led me to climbing, because I remember getting this Braille newsletter a few months after that, and it was this crazy group taking blind kids rock climbing. And I remember running my hand up the wall of my room and thinking, who would be crazy enough to take a blind kid rock climbing? So I signed up because I was tired of building walls around myself. I wanted to tear down those walls. I wanted to build my own vision, like Terry had. And so that led to some incredible adventures around the world. All the goals of my life sprang from that vision. So again, just to sum it up, vision is really that source. You know, it's those values that we try to align with our goals so that that light inside of us can blaze into the world and we can become the person that we want to be. Not what we want to do, but who we want to be. And I've used it so many times in the mountains when you're terrified and you want to quit and you turn into that light. You lean into it. And I say, I am not just the hormones and the chemistry and all the fears and anxieties and doubts that are running through my mind right now, my brain. I am something bigger. I'm something deeper. And I want to strive for that. And I think we all have that ability to do that. Always have something to strive for. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Oh, what a gift to hear you speak again, my friend.
Thank you, Tom.
Stairs are right.
Kumbu Ice Fall.
Yes, the Kumbu Ice Fall right
There
here.
we go. Thanks, Tom.
What's your left? All right. Well, as Eric goes down the ice fall, I just wanted to say thanks again. I have heard Eric speak hundreds and hundreds of times in my life, but each time there's something new that touches my soul about what he says and gives me some piece of wisdom that I can take with me. And I hope that that's the same for you as you cover your own vision today. So now it's your turn. We just heard from Eric talk about how he defined his vision, how he worked through his core values, and ultimately what brought him joy, and how it allowed him to transcend his barriers. Now it's your turn. So before we talked about doing a little exercise where you connected with one another, about sharing that thing that lights that fire inside of you, ultimately what that was is an exercise in discovering what your joy is. What I'd like everyone to do now is to reflect on what their core values are. Eric talked a little bit about the importance of core values. And when I think about core values as its importance to this element, I think about the critical nature of all of us being able to find our fuel. We all are going to face barriers in our lives. And when we face those barriers, we're going to need that fuel to help us get through them. And that fuel will be a combination of those things that bring us joy, that are rooted in our core values. So we're going to do a little exercise here. We're going to ask all of you to define what those core values are for yourself. When I think about the core values in my life, I think about connection. This, being connected with all of you, my No Barriers Rope team. I think about courage. Courage is one of my core values. Just being able to step outside my comfort zone courageously each time. I borrowed from No Barriers Life Elements. Alchemy is one of my 4 core values. That idea of being able to embrace challenge with optimism. And then as a 4th core value for myself, I have trust, which I think is the foundation of all relationships. You know, there's a great quote from Russ Harris, and it's, values are your heart's deepest desires for how you want to behave as a human being. Values are not about what you want to get or achieve. They are about how you want to behave or act on an ongoing basis. So if everyone could just reflect and consider what their core values are, feel free to write it down if you're at home and you have the ability to write something in front of you. Feel free to share it with your neighbor or just ponder the question yourself. Let's do that for the next 30 seconds. And feel free, if you'd like, to come up and see some of the core values that are on the screen in front of us. Hey, Jeff. Okay, hopefully everybody has a chance to reflect on their core values. We're not going to develop our formal vision statements in this session, but I do think that based on the exercise that you've done thus far, I want you to keep thinking about this over the next couple of days and find that vision for yourself. It's very personal to me, but this is my No Barriers family. So I'll share with you what my vision statement is. I carry it in my wallet every day and read it in the morning as a way to center myself on what I'm doing. And I went through the same exercise a couple years ago, rooted myself in my core values, and then ultimately tried to put some words to a vision. My vision, a force for good, a source of unabashed, overflowing, scream it from the mountaintops love for my family and friends, a fully present father and wildly supportive wings outfitter for my kids, a creator of the extraordinary who makes the most of each opportunity for the benefit of others and the world. That may mean nothing to you, but it means the world to me, and it's okay. It's all about how it feeds you and allows you to stay aligned on a vision with each step as you walk up your mountains. Before we get to introducing our next speaker, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what has inspired me about this particular session here. When I think about the importance of vision, what I found in working with all tens and thousands of people who've come through our No Barriers programs is that in order to live a life of purpose, in order to overcome barriers in your way, a person needs to have a vision that elevates others in the world. It's important that that vision be something that's not just about self. It's important that that vision be about others. And that's why it's so perfect that our next speaker is someone that is a key part of our caregivers program. Her name is Rachel Davis. Rachel is a mother hen to a flock of chickens, a volunteer with No Barriers, and also happens to be a full-time caregiver to her husband, Jay, who is injured in a plane crash. Any family caregiver can tell you it's a job with many hats. She plays administrator, nurse, chef, personal assistant, and expert landscaper. That's right. I can't wait to see some pictures of those yards and landscapes, right? She's very passionate about supporting other family caregivers, especially when they're stretched beyond what they can handle. Without further ado, it's my honor to welcome Rachel Davis. Two.
Well, I cannot believe that they are letting me be up here with people like Eric and Mandy Harvey, but here I am. So I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm so involved with the Caregivers program. So for me, a vision is simply the purpose of your entire life. No pressure. Don't worry about it. No big deal, right? Or maybe it's what you thought your life was supposed to have been. And I will tell you right now that I have certainly lost sight of my vision more than once. And I'm the first person to say to you that I am a human being in progress and in process of rediscovering who I am as a human and what I want to personally give back into the world. So to have a clear vision is one of the most difficult and yet one of the most important things that I think someone can do for themselves. And it is difficult because in order to know what your purpose is, you first have to know who you are. And frankly, I think most of us don't know ourselves very well, or as well as we should. So I thought that I wanted like a really successful job. I wanted to climb a corporate ladder. I wanted a nice house and a nice neighborhood, and basically just live your average American life. And then at 30, instead of working on my career and my own aspirations, I was leaving the workforce entirely and becoming a full-time caregiver to my husband. I honestly did not in that moment know who I was. I was just trying to survive. I did not have a vision, and we were just trying to get through that moment. And you see, my husband, Jay, he survived a plane crash, but the crash left him paralyzed from the chest down after he had dislocated his neck. And I know things like this happen, I know that, but they always seem to happen to other people. And maybe that's arrogance on my part, but I never thought it would happen to us. I honestly didn't. I thought the worst case scenario would be that someday he might be killed in a crash. It never once occurred to me that someone might survive with lifelong and life-altering injuries. And when I woke up that morning, I did not know that the entire life that we had built for ourselves was just about to completely explode into oblivion. The person that I thought I knew, me, was gone. The life that we had built for ourselves did not exist anymore. And I know this story is partially about what happened to Jay, or mostly about what happened to Jay. But it's also about what happens to me and all the other family caregivers out there, because disability doesn't just usually impact one person, it impacts everyone around them, especially a traumatic injury. So I was in absolute mourning for the life I thought I was supposed to have. I couldn't rewind the clock, and no one could. And I remember the moment we found out his prognosis in the emergency room, and not a single person could look me in the eye. And it was a pretty crowded room. And that's when I know if medical professionals who, spend their full-time career working in an ER can't look you in the eye, that things might be kind of bad, and they were. And the surgeon finally did look at me, and he told me, what I do, I can repair bones, but I can't fix trauma to a spinal cord. I thought I was on some sort of medical drama TV show, like Grey's Anatomy, ER, something like that. It didn't feel real, but unfortunately it was really real. And I know my husband was going through his own struggles with adapting to his life too. And neither of us were okay. And that's a really hard thing to admit, I think. But there is something my dad used to say to me, and it stuck with me. And it's that the things you can't talk about are the things that will eat you alive. So both myself and my husband Jay have suffered from this accident. And a lot of the pain was physical, but our mental health and our anguish and grief is what came first. We have both since dealt with anxiety, and for me, I also have PTSD as well. And again, that's not an easy thing to just openly talk about. And then I felt guilt. Guilt for being the spouse who wasn't okay, who could not keep it all together all the time. I couldn't be the spouse, the caregiver, and keep working full-time without losing my mind. And then I broke. And I had to admit that I could not continue at the rate I was trying to go. And I think that's something that a lot of folks can relate to no matter what kind of life you're living, whether you're a caregiver, it doesn't matter. And my mental health at that time took a pretty dark turn. I couldn't see a way back for a while. And then the strangest thing happened to me. I started receiving emails from someone, I wasn't even sure how they got my email, from some woman I had never met named Heather Zocali. And for those of you who don't know, Heather Zocali is the head of our caregiver program here at No Barriers. So she started inviting me to all of these events for family caregivers, and man, was she persistent. And you know what, I'm so glad that she was. Because as it turns out, Heather had lived through some of the same trauma that I had experienced myself. And out of that trauma, she became passionate about helping other people who were like her. She started a nonprofit whose mission was just that. So you see, through this major disruption in all of our lives, I found other people who were like me, who'd experienced so many of the same catastrophes and chaos in their own lives. Other caregivers who were helping their spouses, their kids, their parents, their vets, and that's an infinity list. Everyone at some point will either be a caregiver, right? Or you will need to be cared for, maybe both. So this is the reason I became a No Barriers volunteer, and I'm learning to be a caregiver retreat leader as well. So, at the start of my journey, I did not know about the lack of resources for caregivers. I was completely ignorant to the ongoing struggle of people with disabilities just to be recognized for what they do contribute and maintain steady work. I didn't see it because it wasn't part of that narrow corporate ladder and corporate world in which I thought that I used to belong. And the truth for me is that I personally didn't belong there. And I think for a lot of people, that can be a very, very fulfilling thing. Maybe that is part of your vision. But through this, I learned it wasn't part of mine. So personally, I grow through connection. And I find strength in the stories of other people and the friendships that I have made through this brutal new world. So one of the things I want to tell you about the No Barriers Caregiver Program is when we get together, the friendships you make are instantaneous because you start off by sharing your most vulnerable stories with one another. So you become lifelong friends with people that you met the other night. And it's really true. And I don't know how to explain it any better than that. So another thing I realized is that that house and that career that I thought I wanted was actually just stuff that I wanted. It wasn't my true vision. So I'm here today because I came to No Barriers a few years ago as a participant. And I was looking for myself in a pretty dark moment. But I'm still here because I found something that was missing, and that something is me. And I realized I do have something to offer the world, and that's compassion. So I have compassion for the next family going through a trauma, for the next spouse who doesn't know where to turn when your world explodes. And that's what I have to offer. And I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to implement that vision in every part of my life yet. And I also think it's okay for us not to have it all together, because the point of vision is that we know what energy and what purpose we want to send into the world. And then we can start working towards that purpose in small steps and big steps and everything that comes in between. So vision is not about having a plan or a roadmap completely in place. It's about knowing where you want to go and how you want to live your life. So my vision for myself now is simply to be an advocate for myself or for the next person going through a family trauma, or who doesn't have a voice, or who can't speak up for themselves, and especially for the next family member who unexpectedly gets thrown into the world of caregiving. So whatever that means at the time, or whatever power that I personally have at the time, that is my vision, and it doesn't have to be yours, because that one's mine. So you can pick your own vision, but that one's mine. So thank you.
Rachel, thank you so much for giving your insight and sharing your wisdom with us on how your vision became a part of your life, and not just your life, but the caregivers that you serve and so many others that have been part of this No Barriers Caregivers community. Well, we're winding down in our session on vision. And before we close up today, I wanted everyone to reflect, and this will be a question that's for our virtual attendees, will be posed in the chat. And that is, what is the biggest takeaway about vision in this session that you want to remember, that you want to take forward with you?
And Joseph Modalist from the Leaders. I mean, I've worked.
While you're filling that in chat, if there's anyone here that wants to shout it out, I think you've got something, right?
It's such hard work.
Don't give up. Great. Kara.
The drummers, they give you the freedom to be able to.
What's that? Yes. Yes, absolutely. The sky's the limit. Absolutely. Any other thoughts, any other reflections you want to take away? Well, I wanted to also share with you, oh, Kara, yes. Okay. Well, if there's other ideas, feel free to shout them out. Part of the great beauty of this No Barriers community is that we're here for each other to support each other along our respective journeys, right? So we bring our whole selves to the table, we share our struggle, and we support each other as we move forward. And part of that support is sharing this lesson on vision. And I want everyone to know that we're a rope team for each other. Writing down your vision statement and staying on that vision path is not always easy, but it's that first important step. The secret to living that No Barriers life is to have that vision that elevates others in the world. And I think that in this session, we were able to tackle some of those key challenges in order to get there. One of the important things that I wanted to cover is come back to the No Barriers Pledge. The No Barriers Pledge is this commitment to take positive action in your life that elevates others in the world. When you registered for the summit, you filled out a pledge. And for our virtual attendees, you can go to the pledge room right now and enter it in there. And of all the people that submitted pledges, you'll be entered into a drawing. And our generous partner at Airbnb is going to select 40 winners to get $500 credits with Airbnb. So kudos to our sponsor, Airbnb, for that. As we close, I just want to thank Eric and Rachel for sharing their stories and sharing their vision with us. And also, when I think about all of the gifts that we've had from all of the speakers throughout our opening session, one thing that stays with me is that when we think about creating a life for ourselves and when we think about creating a vision for ourselves, I think Eric had a beautiful way of saying it. We're all going to encounter barriers in our lives, but we have a choice. We have a choice to make. There's that space in between the bad thing that happens to us and what happens next. And in that space is our choice, and that choice is to move forward toward our vision. With that being said, let me introduce Jeff Evans, the coolest man in No Barriers, to come up and share a little bit of his wisdom with us. Here he comes, Jeff Evans.
All right. I think I'm going to high five with Tom and figure out where we can leave off and pick up. Okay, thank you, Tom. So, hi everybody. We were just talking backstage and trying to think of a natural segue for the people who are online versus the people who are currently here escaping the sun. So for those of you who are remote right now, sitting in your air-conditioned living rooms, kudos to you and congratulations. As you can see, all of us have now retreated to the small amount of slivered shade over here. So I just want to really just appreciate the whole event that's taken place here and the opportunity for everybody to come together, both virtually and in person. It's been an amazing experience. I'll just be quite transparent with you that, I've been brothers with Eric for close to 30 years now. Sadly, it's been that long, but every time that Eric's like, man, you got to come to the summit. It'll be great. You'll see. And I remember the first few, I'm like, okay, if you really want me to, I guess so. And I'll show up and I walk away 2-3 days later, heart full, eyes open, feeling a sense of community that I never could have imagined. And then I realized that what's happening here are people are walking the walk and not just talking about it. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to listen to a lot of people talk, and we hear all these amazing stories. They're all so profound, and I cried another half dozen times this morning. That's all great, but all those are is words. They're just words, simply words, until we all depart from this place, both virtually and in person here. And we go back to our families, and we go back to our communities, and we go back to the people that we love. And then that's when it really happens. That's when you take the spirit of everything you've learned this weekend back and put it to action. So sorry, Lisa, I'm not reading the teleprompter. I'm going for it, if that's okay. So my job was just to come up here and just wrap things up. So do you want me to talk about these 7 elements, or did Tom talk about them? Did Tom talk about the 7 elements? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through all of Tom's slides here and make sure I'm not missing anything really important. Yeah, so there we go. Marks about what we've seen and experienced so far. Turns out I just hit that. Good job. All right. Okay, this is what we need to do. We're going to wrap up the pledge, and I'll give you one more little anecdotal story about the pledge. Those of you who've been to Nepal before, experienced the Himalayan culture, perhaps you've even seen it. There are these prayer flags, right? It's very deep into the Buddhist culture, and prayer flags are ubiquitous with, trekking and climbing throughout the Himalayas, which Eric and my boy Diedrich right there have done a lot of over the years. And when you're there, you feel them, you see them. And what's written on these prayer flags, for many of us, we just see all these pretty colors flapping in the wind. But what those are prayers that are written in Sanskrit. And those prayers, as the wind blows, they're blown up to the heavens and heard and manifested. And that it was the genesis of the pledge, is that when we write things down, we hold ourselves accountable. And then those pledges and the words that we put down are cast to the heavens and are heard. And then we walk that walk, making those pledges come true. So that's where the idea of the pledge came to be, and how it's sort of permeated within the No Barriers culture. So I know that everybody's been sort of working on their pledge, both remotely, virtually, and then in person. So I can tell you, everybody's going to have a very subjective answer for what their pledge was, and what it may look like for you. And I think that's the unique nature of being in a place like this, surrounded by so many people. But I will tell you that one thing that I'm walking away with, one thing that really always affects me when I come here, is that this event, these moments that we all share together, create an environment in my heart and in my place to be more present, to listen more, to hear more, to appreciate more of the people around me who are communicating with me, how to continue to elevate them up, not just listening and opening my ears, but opening everything that's connected to my ears. And I will continue to do that. And I feel like that is my pledge going forward. I feel like when you do that, you become a better spouse, a better partner, a better parent, a better kid, a better student. You're not spending as much time on your phone. I got you, man. I got a 16-year-old. I know how that works. And then, one of the other things is what the tools that you have at your disposal to be able to continue to execute that. Well, I think we learned what that biggest tool was, which was the community and the people that we're around, the people that we share it, leaning on each other, but holding each other accountable. Once again, it's all words unless we hold ourselves accountable. And I think that's a real ask of each of us, is how accountable we can be to ourselves and to the people around us. So now, just because we're wrapping up our live programming and everybody here that's gathered into the shade over in the corner, the virtual summit is quite far from over. So even for those of you who are here in the shade, for those of you who are attending remotely, we have more ways to help you accomplish your goal of reaching your pledge. It's not a simple thing. It's very complex. It takes a lot of effort. It doesn't happen on its own. One anecdotal piece of that is just think about that rope that we all talk about all the time. Those of us who climb big mountains, we're always connected by that rope. That rope connects us, but it doesn't just do it automatically. it requires attention. I like to think of it as attention to the tension of that rope. If it's too loose, we bumble against each other. Eric has been known to let the rope go a little too loose from time to time and step on it. Back in the day, he used to step on that thing with his crampons. Eric, you will tell us, what was the wager every time you stepped on the rope? You owed me a beer. Yeah. So every time he stepped on the rope, he owed me a beer. And I'll tell you that I had to basically put a lid on that because otherwise I would have been an alcoholic. So it was a lot of rope stepping. So why? You have to pay attention to if it's too tight, you get pulled. What we used to say, Eric, hauling tuna. When Eric, if the rope got too tight, it was hauling tuna up the hill, right? So these are metaphors for all of us to be able to continue to pay attention to the tension of the rope. That is what accountability looks like being together. So going forward virtually, you're going to hear from some amazing speakers virtually, like Christine Haas. She was on the podcast with Eric and I. She's amazing. She's a master restaurateur. I'm not sure which one it is. She's a writer, a TV host, and she's the first blind contestant on that show Master Chef, and she won the 3rd season of that. You'll hear from folks like a guy named Matt Scott, who's an athlete and one of the great participants, players that's on the Paralympic basketball team, who I think are competing right now. I think they're 2-0 from what I understand. And then Maya Penn, she's an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a CEO. She owns her own eco-friendly fashion company. You're going to learn some new tips and tricks and more methods, more ways of being accountable to overcome your barriers and keep pushing forward with your pledge. That's paying attention to the tension of the rope. So we have a super cool panel that's sponsored by Wells Fargo that'll take a deep dive into what professional workplace, and then financial inclusions look like. Wells Fargo knows a lot about that. And also hear from our friend Hugh Herr, who, as you heard from Eric, he's an adventurer, an amazing rock climber, and a biophysicist. He's got an amazing story. And all that's going to be happening virtually throughout the day today. So we'll finish out the day with an epic closing ceremony filled with lots of performances, lots more inspiration, and then a concert from none other than my crush, Mandy Harvey. And be sure to come back on Monday as well, because Wells Fargo is hosting a career fair, and you can check out more information in their virtual booth. I guess Wells Fargo has a virtual booth. So we'll be taking a quick break right now from here, and then in person for those of you who are watching home. We're all going to go drink some ice cold lemonade. Those of us are sitting in the sun. The next virtual session is going to start at 11:30 Mountain Time. So that's 8 minutes from now. So don't go too far. And we'd also like for you to take this time right now to discuss your pledge with other people in the No Barriers community. Because if you don't, then it just sits in your head. It goes nowhere. You don't share it, it doesn't become accountable. You're not paying attention to the tension of the rope. So for those of you at home, take this short break to connect with others. There's chat rooms. You can communicate with others virtually. And hey, pick up a phone. Go old school, OG, phone calls, FaceTime. That's pretty fun too. So from all you others that are all over the world and go to these water cooler breakout rooms in that virtual platform. So for those of you who are enduring the sun and the heat here in person, I encourage you to break out. Eric loves to hold virtual communication sessions. He's right there sort of in the semi-shade area, and he loves it when people gather around him and talk and communicate. And so does my friend Diedrich there. He loves to hold team building sessions on his own. And I'll be happy to chat more. All jokes aside, this is what we do. We love this. We drink this. We eat this. This is our lives. Right now, they're pitching the Eric and Jeff No Barriers TV show. And what we've been telling all these silly LA agents is, hey, we're doing this with or without you. We're doing it with or without the cameras, because this is the life that we lead. We love being around this community. We love talking about these concepts, and we love holding people accountable as they continue to move forward. So, so we're gonna, I think those of us that are here, we're gonna kind of move around the corner, maybe even find some more shade down there. So For those of you who are in person, stick around to hear from some amazing students from this Global Impact Challenge. So that's that GIC group. These teams addressed this issue of diversity and inclusion in 2019, and then were ultimately chosen as winners. So stay tuned to hear from them about their amazing initiatives. So, hey, thank you for joining us. Thank you to the Great Spirit for providing this wonderful place for us and the great, beautiful blue sky. All of us Colorado people are like, hey, it's not smoky anymore. What a wonderful place. What a gift and an honor for us all to be together. So thank you very much. That's all y'all. Thank you.